Hello all.
Oh,
Here we are.
you are.
It's a long way from Italy to the United States. The signal had to fly here.
Okay, so I introduce you also if you are very famous and
No.
you are going to be also a distinguished visitor professor from September to Bologna Business School.
Yes.
Very glad to have you in Italy for teaching also. You are always in Italy. You also speak a good Italian. But I introduce you. Alec Ross is an entrepreneur. He's an academic. He's author of bestseller translated in 24 languages. He was senior advisor for innovation of Hillary Clinton, and he's a very, very expert in geopolitics and digital and geopolitics. That is a very important focus in this period. So, Alex, you also are a candidate in politics. You are still candidate or not?
No, no. No. I'm from La Squadra Obama, and so we are all today. Now is Trump's moment. So those of us from the Obama world, we're out of it a bit right now. Now I'm writing another book, so I'm trying to stay out of the day-to-day of politics and write and teach. I'm very excited to be teaching at Bologna Business School soon.
Okay, so sometimes I will look to my computer, but it's just to see the questions that arrive.
Of course.
So we're starting from the situation as it is now in US. When I watch TV and I can see my colleague and friend Claudio Pagliara, who is the correspondent from RAI in the streets of New York, I can still see people around him talking and going together, less people, but not like in Italy where you can see desert around, and also not wearing masks and so on. So my question is the administration conscious of what is happening and they are taking time, or they're not conscious?
No, it's a very important question, Barbara. Look, I checked the statistics right before I got on, right before I joined this Instagram discussion with us. And the US, as of yesterday, we now have more cases of coronavirus than China and Italy. It's over 100,000 now. And the slope on the straight up. It's going straight up. But about 40%, 40% of the people still think it's a hoax, or they think it's no big deal. It's like influenza. And Trump is one of these. Trump cares a lot more about the economy than he does public health. And so what he has refused to do what you've done in Italy and what's been done in South Korea and what's been done in China, which has closed things down. So it's up to the individual governors, the individual regions to decide if things get shut down. And this is a huge mistake because a virus doesn't respect a border. So right now in Florida, which has demographics like Lombardia, it's a lot of older people. People still go to the restaurants. They go to the bars. It's like Milan 6 weeks ago.
But as you have a press that is famous all over the world for his democratic side, there's not a consciousness among journalists who interview scientists or just show images from Italy.
Yes. So the answer is yes. And this has persuaded most of America. If you look at the coast, New York, California, but there's some places on the inside of America where people don't believe the press. They say everything is fake news. So something can be from the, outstanding journalists, but there's a big percentage of America that doesn't believe the media anymore. They think if the media writes something, even if it's the New York Times or the Washington Post, they're like, oh, they just want to create hysteria so that Trump loses. Oh, they're lying. And so the fake news problem in the United States right now is literally going to kill people, because you've got some people who refuse to follow the rules, who refuse to listen to the scientists. And this includes some governors. It's not just poorly educated people. The governor of Mississippi a couple days ago said, oh, people for, Pascua should come and sit on our beaches and come to our bars. So it's about 30 or 40% of the United States right now. This is nothing to be proud of and nothing to joke about.
So from the economic side, can you give us a view in a short time, I mean from here to 1 year, in a medium time term, that is from 1-2 years, and in a long term that is more than 2 years, of the effects of this coronavirus?
Yeah, and so let me compare the US, the EU, and China, all three of these. So first, short term. The name of the game in the short term is two things. It's survival and cash. Can you make it through being closed for a few months? And do you have the cash reserves to be able to hold out long enough? So yesterday, a bill was passed in the United States Congress, $2.2 trillion. There's never been anything like this. By way of comparison, the Recovery Act from the financial crisis in 2008, it was about 1/3 as large. What's interesting is the choice that Congress and Trump made. It's that the focus of this bill is really on big business, the airlines, the hotels, the very big businesses, and less so on the small businesses. So I think for the short term, what's happened, again, speaking of the United States, the big businesses are going to survive and the small businesses are going to get hurt. In China, I think that they've restated me. I can be very critical of China, but you have to give the Chinese government credit for the discipline it is taken to take very necessary steps. And while I think we will see a big decrease in GDP, I think that over the short term, comparing the EU, the US, and China, I think China is going to be the strongest over the short term. Sadly, and I'm very sorry to say this, I think that Europe is actually going to have the most difficulty over the short term because the balance sheets of the corporates in Europe are not as strong as the balance sheets of the corporates in the United States, and it's far from China. So that's the short term. The intermediate term, thinking, 1 to 2 years, I think that China will come out of this stronger, frankly. It will come out of this, even though the virus started in China, I think that it, in many respects, will come out stronger. The United States, I think the Fortune 500, our biggest companies, may come out of this stronger, but the American economy will have lost in part because of the pain to the small businesses. With Europe, it's an open question. With Europe, there is an opportunity now for it to reimagine its economy and do some things that may have been difficult to do 2 or 3 years ago from a regulatory and investment perspective. But there's going to be an opportunity over the intermediate term to revitalize economically. On the long term, speaking of the US, EU, and China, I think that we are going to see more hostile relationships between the US and China because of coronavirus, and we are going to see a long-term, what's gone from competition to hostility. And we are going to see real economic hostility between the United States and China, in part as a byproduct of things like renationalizing supply chains. I think we're going to see a lot of American supply chains pull out of China, and we are already seeing a propaganda war between the countries. Long term, thinking about the economic ties between the EU and the US, it all comes down to the election in November. I believe that Trump does not like Europe, and he does not like the EU. He likes some individual countries in Europe. I actually think Trump likes Italy, but he hates Germany, he hates France, he has a hot and cold relationship with the UK. If Trump wins in November, you're going to see more America first, more America only, and less economic ties between Europe and the US, because I believe that Trump will try to put more tariffs and more nationalism into our trade. If Biden wins, Biden loves Europe. He loves the EU and he loves Italy. I think that Biden will try to reverse the negative diplomacy between Europe and the US, and part of that will be in trade. I think we will see much more favorable trade conditions between the US and Europe if Biden wins in November. So interestingly, something in the short term taking place in November will have a lot to do with the long-term economics across continents.
According to what you think about Europe, two questions. The first is, they are talking here, discussing if there will be a sort of Marshall Plan, but done from China. Do you think it is possible, or it's all propaganda like other first host of QuaranTalks said it was for Chielli? And second, which is the destiny you can see for Europe? You said it could be an opportunity, but what we are seeing is that a renationalizing, also if it's been more in the first weeks, and also a regionalizing in the same nations of little territories. So what will happen with Europe? We were building with Ursula von der Leyen for the first time, also from a digital side, something that was conscious and related to the growth of European system. Everything was going in the right direction, but now everything seems to be broken.
Right. So on your first question, will there be a Marshall Plan? No. Entire cities were rebuilt through the Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan took a Europe that was in rubble from the Second World War and rebuilt it. I think there will be big assistance programs from China, but there's a difference between assistance programs. Hey, we'll invest in, a railroad system, or we'll invest in a telecom system. There's a big difference between that and a Marshall Plan. So I do think that we're going to see China, especially with the United States, being very arrogant, and the United States, unlike Ebola, for Ebola, H1N1, SARS, we saw the United States acting very collaboratively, whereas right now I think we're acting much more arrogantly. I think China sees this as an opportunity to make progress in Europe. It can make progress through assistance, but I think it will not make the kinds of massive investments that we saw from something like a Marshall Plan. To the second part of your question, this is the big choice here. Does Europe become more divided? Is there more sovranismo, or does it come together? This is an open question. I don't know the answer to it. But what I will say is that this is an opportunity for Europe to say, all right, to this point, it's like a Serie A football match where there are two teams on the pitch, the American team and the Chinese team. And the Europeans don't have a team on the pitch. They're the referee blowing the whistle and handing out yellow cards. This is an opportunity, I believe, for Europe to say, you know what? We don't want to just be on La Squadra Americano or La Squadra Cinese. We need our own model. And I do think that if borders harden, if we see an assertion of nationalism after all of this, then what Italy has to do is Italy has to come up with its own model for its own economic interests. And there are a lot of assets there. So I'm a very optimistic person, and I actually truly believe in my heart that the 2020s will be better than the last 10 or 20 years in Italy. And coronavirus is a tragedy. It is killing our people, but we need to emerge out of this and say, all right, we were sleeping. Now we need to wake up, and we need to rebuild our economy with a level of discipline and strategy that didn't exist there before.
Do you think that there is the possibility that traditional enemies, country like US and China and Russia and Iran, start to collaborate because of this huge emergency? First question. And second, China now, you said it's going to be empowered by this pandemic. But they told that 21 million of mobiles and SIM cards disappeared.
Yep.
So
disappeared.
Say, yes, we
disappeared.
Yes, someone is saying that it is a fake news. Some others say that there are some deaths that we don't know. What do you think about it? What you know about?
Yeah, so the first part of your question, should traditional rivals collaborate? Yes, we always have before. Science and health should not be about geopolitics. We've always done this in the past. And this is the first time that we're screwing this up. This is the first time that we are choosing to put politics in front of public health. So it's a big mistake. And I hate to say this, I'm an American. I am a patriotic American, but America deserves most of the blame. It's America and China who deserve most of the blame. China, and I'm going to tie this to the second part of your question, China deserves part of the blame for hiding this for too long and for not being transparent. On the social networks, on WeChat and other things in China, when this virus was emerging, it filtered all of the information out. It was pretending like it wasn't happening. This is wrong. The United States, in turn, has been wrong because it's been viewing this not through our common humanity, thinking about how to solve this through common humanity, like how we did with Ebola, but rather more selfishly. And we saw this recently. There was some news that got out that Trump tried to do a deal with a German pharmaceutical maker, offering $1 billion to develop a vaccine, but to make the vaccine available to America. So this is a lack of leadership. And I will say that where people in government have been lacking leadership, I will give credit, though, to the doctors, to the academic institutions, and to the leaders in medical fields who, World Health Organization and others, who are working together despite the politicians. A final note on China, you were asking about fake news and 21 million SIMs that, magically disappeared. It's impossible for us to know what's really happening there. 2 weeks ago, China kicked out all the American media. So the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, all got kicked out of China. So we are now relying on the Chinese for all of the information coming out of China. And then magically, all this, they're reporting numbers of new infections that are almost nothing. I have a hard time believing that. And I have a feeling there are a lot more people who have gotten sick or died or tested positive than they're sharing. And the solution moving forward is for us to stop with the egos, stop with the nationalism, and start and collaborate for the benefit of humanity.
Which you think will be the relationships, if they will change, between US and Italy?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The United States views Italy very sympathetically right now. I would talk to my friends, dico sempre che Italia è il mio secondo paese, ho un'anima italiana. So I love Italy. And I would talk to my friends in Italy, and they would say, oh, you know, I hope you don't see us as stupid, as having made all these mistakes, don't believe all the news. And I would always say, no, 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 no. We are praying for Italy and for Italians. So I actually think that Italy and the U.S. are going to go through this very similarly. And I think that it can bring us more closely together. I think that right now the United States is in a position where we need to learn from the Italian experience. Dobbiamo imparare da quello che è successo in Italia. We've got to, you know, first I will say, if it had not happened the way it did in Italy, the U.S., the states would not do the restiamo a casa strategies that we're doing right now. The only reason we're doing restiamo a casa è perché abbiamo visto cosa è successo in Italia. Mm-hmm. Because we would never have done this.
Still in the first phase of Boris Johnson's attitude.
Yeah, I mean, there was too much arrogance. You know, it was like almost, you know, a couple weeks ago, you know, we are about 2 weeks behind Italy. About 2 weeks behind Italy. And so was UK. You know, the UK was behind Italy, but sure enough, we all learned. It's not that Italians were stupid or lazy. It's just that things happened there earlier. So the US and the UK were like, stiamo bene. You know, we're fine. Leave it alone. It's going to go away. That's the way Boris Johnson was. That's the way Donald Trump was. But guess what? It's a virus. You know, and you can't, machismo does not work with a virus. And so in the UK, they are learning the exact same lesson. Prince Charles has coronavirus. Boris Johnson has coronavirus. Huge percent, more and more people are getting it every day. This virus is not about nationality at all.
Now, one question from the public.
Yep.
In your opinion, how the worldwide COVID crisis will impact the green sustainable transition?
I'm so glad that question was asked. This is one of the areas where I'm very optimistic, and let me explain why. First of all, I think a lot of people did not believe enough in the need for a real commitment to fight climate change because it seemed so far away. It seemed unimaginable for something huge to crush us. I think that what coronavirus has shown us is that, yes, we can be crushed. And the thing after coronavirus that can crush our world is climate change. And so what I hope is that the lack of discipline and the lack of strategy that we have had for a commitment to a green and sustainable future, people can now imagine bad things happening. And I hope that we will recommit to that after this. For me, coronavirus is like a wake-up call. It's like a wake-up call that bad things can happen, that there are existential threats in the world, that we are not bulletproof. And so I actually think that there's an opportunity coming out of this for us to, when we rebuild our economy, we should rebuild our economy with sustainability at its core.
Another question. Our government is carrying into EU debate the necessity of cooperation in COVID vaccine. Something that can work in your idea?
Yes, like absolutely. Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is if you go to Silicon Valley, Silicon Valley, for example, is a place where people think of as the heart of innovation. It's in America, but it's not entirely American. There are people from India, from China, from Italy, from Germany. It's like Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley because people have come together from around the world to collaborate. And if you think about scientific discovery, it tends to come very collaboratively and across borders. The breakthroughs with AIDS came through, largely between a collaboration between the French and the Americans. So I do think that the way to do real vaccine discovery is to pool the scientific talent in Europe. Some countries are great at manufacturing and commercialization. Some countries have scientists who are better at basic research. Italians and French tend to be brilliant basic researchers. The Germans and the Swiss tend to be very good at production and commercialization. I think there's a way for us to pool our strengths as opposed to having a Swiss strategy or a German strategy or a British strategy.
We remember the plan for health public system, the Obama plan.
Yep.
Do you think that Trump will be empowered because, of course, fear empower in general his kind of leadership from all this fear that we have for this coronavirus, or when it will impact the health system, it will be a danger for him from a political point of view, because it will show that you don't have a public system that can support this.
So I'm going to speak very undiplomatically. This is a case where the truth is ugly. The truth here is that people love strong leaders in times of crisis. So after 9/11, people love George W. Bush. Even right now in the U.S., a lot of people approve of Trump because he goes up and he speaks very strongly. Ultimately, if we come through coronavirus quickly, Trump probably wins re-election in November, because it will be seen as a sign that he was strong and he was right. Trump probably could very well lose in November, though, and it all has to do with how many people die. And does it overrun the health system? But this is where things get uglier. If it happens in New York or California, it won't matter as much, because those states already support the Democrats. What matters is, our health systems in the middle of America run over? In Michigan, in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, in those places in the middle of America. So if it's New York or California, and he'll just blame the Democrats. He'll blame but if it hits his people, white people, older people in the middle of America, and it shows the weakness of the public healthcare system, I think it'll really hurt Trump.
Going to your field of innovation, do you think that, wait a moment, I have to charge the mobile.
Yeah.
Do you think that the coronavirus will enable a stronger massive surveillance? Because of course we do everything online, so everything can be controlled. In Italy we do everything on US platforms, not European. And we have some help, and I guess we will have probably some structures from China. But all the world is online, and all the world is developing a control because of data on health, on tracking, where people go, moving. Do you think we could go back when the danger and the emergency will finish, or will it stay in a surveillance total system, global system?
So this is a choice, and it's a choice that we have to make soon. In Israel and in China, they've already embraced the surveillance system. So in Israel, people didn't even know it was there until the Israeli government announced that they were using the system to track people who had tested positive. In the US, it doesn't exist. We have the capabilities, but it would actually be against the law to track that kind of individual data by government. The surveillance that takes place in the US is surveillance by private companies. It's not surveillance by the US government. With the US government surveils everybody else. So it's really a choice. And when I talk about un modelo europeo, it should reflect European values. And so my strong advice to Europeans, to Italians, is say, don't just accept the Chinese model of surveillance. Don't just accept the American model of, the boys in Silicon Valley capture all of our data. Have your own model for what is legal and what is illegal. And GDPR is not enough. It's too weak. It's too complicated, and it's too easy to just chip accetto.
Yes.
You just click, oh, accetto. It doesn't. It's not important. So I do think that this is a choice where you don't have to accept the Chinese model of government surveillance or the American model of corporate surveillance. There should be a European model where what happens in Europe reflects the values and choices of Europeans, and you can do it. I say this as somebody who is an American venture capitalist and entrepreneur and who knows this content inside out. You can do it. You can make your own choices. You don't have to just choose the Chinese model or the American model.
So, a question from your future colleague, Andrea Pontremoli. Italy should ask some help, and if the answer is yes, which kind of help? And it has to ask to Europe, to US, to China, or to Russia?
Yeah, so let me say, I've been very disappointed so far that Europe has not been more helpful to Italy. Italy was the first place. I think the EU has not done great in the initial response to this, simply from an equipment standpoint. Those parts of Europe that are less negatively affected so far by coronavirus should be playing more of a role in terms of providing doctors, providing healthcare workers, providing equipment like PPE, and providing ventilators, and providing financial assistance.
Something is...
There are not more doctors from the rest of Europe coming to help Italy. That's a request that should be made there. From China, it's really about equipment. A lot of the equipment is manufactured there, so I think the way that the Chinese can help most is by sending ventilators, sending equipment. And then with the US, it's really going to be investment. So as hard hit as we are being from a health standpoint, we actually have a lot of money. And what I would say is now is a time when we emerge out of this crisis, the tariffs that we've been putting on European goods, whether it's formaggio parmigiano, whether it's vestiti, like we should take them to zero. We should be purchasing lots of Italian exports and taking out anything that creates a barrier to Italian business, because what America can really do is help the Italian economy after this. So from Europe, I would say it's doctors, it's equipment, it's finance. From China, I would say it's equipment. From the US, I would say it's investment.
Okay, another question. You said we'll have to face climate change, but the crisis plan in Washington lowered the emission standard and took power away from the Environmental Protection Agency. Are we talking hope or possibility?
It's both. I mean, look, you're absolutely right. What I'm saying we should do is not necessarily what we're doing. As I said, I hate partisan. I hate to be partisan. I am, look, I'm from the La Squadra Obama. And the Trump administration has done exactly what you just described. You're telling the truth. So the only way for something to become a possibility is with hope. I believe in hope. And, we Americans, we get made fun of because we're so optimistic. But guess what? Only optimists change the world. Pessimists never change the world. Only optimists change the world. So yeah, I'm absolutely hopeful, but I view that hopeful even when it's a bit naive. I think that even naive hopefulness is the only thing that can actually produce change. So yeah, we're doing the wrong things. We're being stupid. But that doesn't make me less hopeful.
How do you think, more in general, the crisis will affect U.S. mentality towards healthcare system? Could it potentially endorse figures like Sanders?
Yeah, so I think Sanders' day has passed, but there's AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. There's a whole younger generation of people who are saying that healthcare should be a right and not just for the elites. Look, io sono nel 1%. I live a good life. And because of I have great healthcares in the world. My children and my wife are able to get the best doctors in the world. But, me in the 1%, I can see the injusticia, I can see the injustice where the quality of the healthcare you get is based on, are you wealthy or not? And if you're wealthy, you get the best healthcare. If you're middle class, you get middle healthcare. And if you're poor, you get no healthcare. So I do hope, again, here's that word again, hope. I do hope that part of what the coronavirus exposes is the injustice in the American healthcare system. And so some of the ideas of somebody like an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez about bringing universal healthcare gain strength. So Obama tried, and Obamacare, we got healthcare for 35 million more Americans, but then we couldn't go past that. It got blocked in Congress by the Republicans. What we need to do is stop making healthcare about what party you're in. Oh, it's, in Italy, I don't think you think of access to healthcare as, Partito Democratico, La Lega, Fratelli d'Italia. Ma dai, it's healthcare. It's not about partisan politics. But we in the United States have managed to turn access to healthcare into a partisan political issue. And hopefully coronavirus slows that down or stops it. We'll see. That might be too much hope.
In the first weeks, we have seen many Americans going to buy guns. Here, we are more afraid about suicides and depression of the middle and lower class. Do you think that we will have problems as consequence, also from psychological side, that will be worse than what we are living now, and consequence, of course, of what we are living now and economic problems?
Yeah, so this is a big problem. The psychological effects of isolation are real. And again, a lot of this has to do with wealth. So I live in a big house with my wife and 3 kids. We have yards that we can walk into. We have a lot of room. But if you are a lower income person and you live in a little apartment, or if you live by yourself, the isolation grows worse. And it's hard for everybody. It's hard for all of us who are in isolation right now. And the longer this goes, the worse it's going to get. And it's something you almost don't want to talk about. But I do imagine in a few weeks, we will see more news about suicide. The difference is that in the United States, I don't own a gun, but many people do own a gun. This goes back in our culture, from hundreds of years. Whereas in Italy, not every house has a gun. So I do think that if we are going to see suicide and an increase in suicide, while we may see some of it in Italy, I think we're going to see a lot more of it in the United States where there's access to firearms.
Okay, now our time is finished, and there should be the last sentence and to the thank for you from Max Bergami. But as one of the problems is that our network is lower times in the day, because everybody's online like they were before. Now I have not my Wi-Fi in
No,
house
that's,
because there is a 3G, so it works
yep.
mobile, but it doesn't work here. So I can't read you the sentence of Max, and I will thank you for him.
Thank you.
And we are waiting to have you as a distinguished professor, visiting professor in Bologna in September. We are very happy to have you there.
Well, thank you, Barbara. Let me say thank you for this conversation. Thank you to Bologna Business School for doing this every day. It's like we were talking about isolation a few minutes ago. This is part of how you can reduce isolation. And then let me just say thank you to all of you who have been listening in. As was shared, I am moving with my family to Bologna at the end of August. I will be teaching at Bologna Business School. And in part because I do believe that now, the months ahead will be a time for all of us to commit to the rebirth of a stronger, happier Italy. And I will be honored to be a part of that. So I thank Bologna Business School, I thank Barbara, I thank Max Bergami, e grazie a tutti voi.
Grazie.